Deaf people are constantly surrounded by a world where everyone's speaking this language they oftentimes just can't get on to. They can't understand. Whether the people are speaking German, Italian, Japanese, or English, they can't hear. They can't understand what's being said. And that's a real barrier for them. The only way they can communicate is through lip reading or through sign language, but so few hearing people know sign language unless they know someone who they have to talk to. And there's such a minority, it feels like there's such a minority of people who need to have sign language to talk that the majority just doesn't feel like it has to learn. They don't feel obligated to learn how to speak sign language. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, the minority, it's technically less work being made for the minority to adjust to the majority, but it still sets up this wall between these two different kinds of people when they're really not two different kinds of people. One can hear, one can't, but it doesn't affect who they are as a person. We see deaf people on the street, and we see them speaking the language we can't understand, whether they're signing or they're looking closely to their friends to see if they can lip read. And they can't understand us most of the time. We're talking. And unless they're really good lip readers, they're gonna have no idea what's coming out of our mouths. So there's immediately this gap we feel from this person. We don't know anything about them, but immediately it seems as though we feel we're separate from them. We're too separate. I don't know how to sign. They can't hear me speak. Why bother? Why even try? But they're just like us. We're just like them. It's not a disability to them, even if we may see it that way. And we tend to view disabilities as something that makes someone lower than us or less capable than us, either in thinking or physical attributes. And that's kind of unfortunate because it keeps us from meeting people or getting to know people that we may share a lot in common with. And it's this whole way of thinking that no one really makes a conscious effort to do. We just feel it and internalize it, and as a result we have two separate cultures, two separate people, and we don't really ever try to make that different. Imagine a world where you were constantly shut out. What if most people didn't see your language as a real language, and never even thought about learning it? There were more than 30 million deaf and hard of hearing people in the United States in 1971. But the government hasn't had an official census of the deaf since 1930. The estimation is that around 13% of Americans are deaf or hard of hearing. That's about the same as the percentage of African Americans living in America, and a little less than the percentage of people living below the poverty line. There are great leaders who are very concerned about African Americans and the poor, but most civic figures aren't worried about the deaf. Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet met a deaf girl and was inspired to try to teach her how to communicate. And her father, who saw his efforts and was very wealthy, funded a trip for him to go to Europe, since there were no deaf schools in America. He traveled to England and met the Braidwood family, and they were in charge of all the schools for the deaf, but focused on the oral method, lip reading and speech. They weren't trying to figure a way out to make it easy for the students, but for the rest of the world. He met Laurent Clerc, and he took Gallaudet to France, where he learned French Sign Language. and in turn Gallaudet taught Clerk English. And they came back to America together, and they established the American School for the Deaf in 1817. Gallaudet married one of the graduates of his school. She was deaf, and they had 8 children. 1864. Lincoln signs a charter to create deaf colleges and the American School for the Deaf was named Gallaudet University in his honor. (1912). Do you like Girl Scout cookies? Come on, everyone likes Girl Scout cookies. But did you know that Juliette Gordon Low, the founder of Girl Scouts of America, was completely deaf from age 26? She didn't let her deafness stand in her way, and she went on to form an institution that is still around today. Plus, we get yummy cookies. She was an inspiration to deaf people because she is famous. Not because she did something that hearing people can do, and was recognized for it because she could do it despite her disability, but because she created something. And she is remembered for that, not for being deaf.
Give me one good reason why we should learn to speak Tony.
To pick up hearing girls.
To pick up hearing girls. Okay, let's work on this. All right, now. You. Okay, here are 2 beautiful hearing girls. You 2 guys want to pick them up. What is the first thing that you want to say, Danny?
Are you rich?
No, are you rich? Say it.
Rich.
Good. Lydia.
I'm very rich.
Good. Tony.
Elizabeth and I decided to do this project because we saw this other project on like deaf communication that someone did a few years back, and it was cool, but all of the presentation was voiceovers and bad graphics, and we thought if a deaf person saw this, they would have no idea what's going on. And we wanted to make a presentation that would show people a little bit more about deaf culture and what it's like to be deaf and how that makes you look at the world, as opposed to shutting them out, because we're not exposed to that every day. We might see people like shopping or on the street, but we just think, oh, they're deaf. I can't talk to them. I can't communicate with them. So they're different, they're other. And we want to close that gap because deaf people are still people.
The deaf see things differently. In the deaf community, there have been many leaders. Search far back in history, you will see famous deaf people. Many deaf people have championed deaf rights and done more for the deaf community. But really, any deaf person who becomes famous becomes a leader and shows the world that deaf people can do everything that hearing people can do, is a hero in the deaf world.